Hello, welcome to 8 Push Simplified. Today we're looking at one of the greatest speeches in American history, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream, delivered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. during a Civil Rights March in 1963. Throughout the speech, MLK speaks on common themes from the Declaration of Independence and American identity, like freedom, equality, and opportunity. Before discussing the key points, let's put the speech into context. Going back a ways, slavery had ended in the 1860s with the end of the Civil War and the 13th Amendment. However, segregation took the place of slavery, which was the separation of the races in many aspects of life. In the South, segregation was de jure, meaning written into laws, that blacks and whites were to be separated in many areas of society. Many blacks were denied the right to vote through impossible-to-pass literacy tests and poll taxes that kept the economically disadvantaged blacks from affording to vote. In the North, there was also segregation, mostly of the de facto kind, meaning it was done by custom. However, there were real rules and laws written into place as well. Redlining had created heavily segregated northern cities, and some of the most segregated places in America today are in the North. And it hurts me to say this because it is my home state, but the city of Milwaukee is amongst the worst. The African American Civil Rights Movement was going strong throughout the 1950s and 60s. That movement also inspired many other movements like the anti-Vietnam War movement, women's rights movement, who were pushing for equal pay, opportunity, and reproductive rights, migrant worker rights movement led by Cesar Chavez, and the burgeoning gay rights movement. These movements continued on throughout the 1970s and saw some real legislative change that we will get into later. But first, let's go to the key points of the speech. King briefly discusses a little history by talking about the Emancipation Proclamation and then the era of segregation, saying African Americans have not experienced freedom because of other people do not treat them as free people. Even though African Americans have been denied their freedom, they continue to fight for it today. And King goes on to encourage all African Americans to go to the southern states and continue to fight for African American freedoms, no matter how long it takes. And he hopes that eventually everyone in the U.S., regardless of ancestry or race, and treat each other based on their character, not on the color of their skin. MLK hopes that one day all people living in the U.S. will be able to fight for their freedoms and rights through the good times and bad times because they know they will be free one day, and he hopes that day will come. So some legislative and legal changes do occur in the following years. The landmark 1964 Civil Rights Act banned discrimination in public places and banned employment discrimination. It was followed up with the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which got rid of all poll taxes and literacy tests, and the federal government was now going to oversee elections in states with histories of curbing citizens' voting rights. Also, the controversial affirmative action was passed, which originally refers to a set of policies and practices preventing discrimination based on race, creed, color, and national origins. Now often refers to policies positively supporting members of disadvantaged or underrepresented groups that have previously suffered discrimination in areas such as education, employment, and housing. Outside of racial issues, there were also gains made in women's rights. While the 19th Amendment guaranteeing a women's right to vote was passed several decades prior, there was still a lot of discrimination against women in a variety of other areas of life. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about gender pay gap, but legally speaking, paying someone less based purely on their gender was outlawed in 1963 Equal Pay Act. The controversial 1973 Supreme Court ruling, Roe v. Wade, opened up legalized abortions, and Title IX was a boost in education arena for women, as no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Finally, let's take a look at the legacy of the speech. King makes connections to the ideals of America in the Declaration of Independence, saying that that was a promissory note from the country to its citizens, and it now needs to uphold its promises. King would remain a main leader of the civil rights movement until his assassination in 1968, which sparked widespread riots. The speech itself became a hallmark of the civil rights era and one of the greatest speeches in American history. To either watch the speech or read the transcript, it is in the video notes below, and I highly recommend doing so.